Hello, everybody. Hello. How's it going? I'm going to play with technology for a minute. Chat panel. Let's see. Hello, can you hear me? Oh, we got lots of people here today. Awesome. Okay, we have like 1 more minute. We all know how I like to start stuff on time. So we're gonna get started. I hope you can hear me. If you can hear me and you are in front of your computer, you can type in the chat box or in the questions. Make sure I'm not talking to myself because that would be boring. Okay. Don't know. Let's see, I'm going to click some buttons over here for a minute. It's working. That's working. This is working. Okay. We'll see what happens. So, exciting stuff. Let me see what else is buzzing over here, because that's going to get annoying. This guy over there. It's like technology consumes our lives. All right, it's 3 o'clock. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Woohoo! Week 2. It's always it always feels more overwhelming than less overwhelming before you really get settled into the process. So if you are panicking in any way, shape, or form, don't. It is going to get better. So I wanted to start off by answering a couple of questions. So I totally forgot last week to talk about Zoom and how this works. There is normally a chat box, and if you're on your computer screen and you hover over, it'll be on the bottom. There is a chat function, and then I can see your questions on the right-hand side. There is also a Q&A box. When you ask questions in the chat, everybody will see your questions. When you ask the questions in the Q&A box, I'm the only one that can see that. So you can use that. However, if you are watching this on your phone, there is no way to ask questions. There are only ways to raise your hand, which I can see that, but there won't be any way for you to ask a question unless I bring you out on video, which I know people don't like doing that. So before we totally wrap up today, I will get back online and see if there are any questions, or if I totally forget and you have questions, I will sure to answer your questions at some point before we finish. But there were 3 questions that came last time via email, and I apologize because I completely shut everything down while I was teaching the class not to be distracted, because I'm not ADD, but I'm very easily distracted. So one of the questions that I was asked was, the monthly files are going to be huge. So we talked about how we're going to put all of the things that have no long-term value to us in our filing systems into these monthly from January through December files. And yes, the correct answer is yes, those files are going to be pretty fat. But remember, it's okay. It's 80% of the paperwork that you're no longer going to need or want. So it's just a temporarily holding place for it before you get rid of it. So, and if you do need something, yes, unfortunately, you're going to have to sort through, a few pieces of paper, more than a couple, but it's okay because at least you know where they are. So as I teach people how to go through the system, there's a lot of anxiety about like, oh my God, I'm never going to find my paperwork again. And the truth is that you have to trust the system, right? If you are constantly following the process by putting all of the things that have no long-term value into your monthly filing, whenever you need something, you know exactly where it is because you've been doing it so naturally and seamlessly. You will find it where it needs to be. But if you don't trust the system, then you're just going to have piles everywhere. So you do have to take a chance, and you do have to think about it a little differently. So it is a fear. I get that from people all the time, and I understand what people are saying. But remember, when we started, I said you are going to have to think about your paperwork a little bit differently than you used to. So fat files are okay. Don't worry. Nothing is going to get lost in there, right? So nothing that you really need should get lost in there. The other question was what to do with business cards. I am not a fan of filing business cards because I feel like it's just one big fat mess that just falls off the side. However, if you feel like you need a hanging file for business cards, you know, it is your filing system and you should go for it. I tend to manage my address book differently. I probably have thousands of contacts in my phone, and whenever I meet somebody, I put their information that I find useful on my phone, and then I write notes in the notes section. So, you know, let's say I met somebody and they could be a good plumber, then I will write a note, you know, plumber that I met at, you know, Chamber of Commerce breakfast. You know, he told me about his mom and his sister and his 3 kids. So then when I'm thinking about this person, I can search easily by the information that I may recall, because unlikely we'll ever remember his name or his business name, right? But I might remember that, like, oh, I remember he had 3 kids and he told me a story about his mother. So I will type that in and it comes up, right? Because I'm using an iPhone, and those things are so super smart and they can help you find all of the information, but you have to give it enough information for it to help you whenever you can't remember. So that's my thing about business cards. Insurance binders. Insurance binders, so specifically if you get like life insurance, they send you this really thick binder that tells you all of the rules and regulations that go with your life insurance. That is not a statement. You should have that, and you should store that separately from your statement. So when I was talking about insurance paperwork, I was just really talking like, you know, all of the monthly things that they may send you, or quarterly, or, you know, 6 months, or, you know, semi-annual or annual that they may send to you. Those are just the pieces of paper that tells you, once again, hey, you owe me money, and then you pay what you owe them, and then that piece of paper is useless. So, and medical EOBs stand for explanation of benefits. And so whenever you go to the doctor, there are a lot of things that happen, right? They'll give you a receipt that comes from your doctor's office. And then if you have insurance and they are processing your claim for you, they will send that information to your insurance company. Your insurance company will probably kick you an EOB, whether it's mailed to you or whether it's sent electronically. You are entitled to one. So it'll tell you how they're handling that claim. That to me is not a medical record. However, I have worked with clients that use, you know, those pieces of paper as a way to record their medical history. So if you're using it as a way to record your medical history, then great, it is part of your medical record. But to me, those are FYI pieces of paper, because once again, you went to the doctor, they filed a claim on your behalf, your insurance company is telling what they're going to do with that claim. If you don't like what they're saying, then you have to, you know, further follow up. But if you're okay with what they're doing with it, then you basically can just put it in your monthly file. So those are the 4 questions that I had that I wanted to address and start off with. So I still haven't heard from anybody. Assuming you can hear me, otherwise you'll be telling me. So I wanted to recap a little bit from last week. We talked about visualization, and I was lucky to spend some time with one of the members of this boot camp, and she gave me some really good feedback. And one of the feedback was that I didn't give you time to visualize about your office. And unfortunately today I have so much planned that we might be here for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. So we're not going to have any more time to visualize what your office is going to look like. But I want to make sure that you gave this some thought, and that you're thinking about what you want that space to look like, right? And one thing that I like to point out is that like having an organized office may not necessarily be about your office, right? It could be about the fact that there will be no paperwork in your kitchen or your dining room, and that now you can have dinner with your family, right? It could mean that you can open the door and you don't have to feel embarrassed about, who's looking into your home, right? So just don't really just get caught up on like, oh, I have to have this perfect looking office. It's like, where's paperwork encroaching into your life that by organizing your paperwork and organizing your office, that will free up from in other areas of your life. I gave you a video about the power of habit. I absolutely love that book. I think that, developing habits is extremely difficult. And honestly, I have so many things that I start and I give up, and then I start again and I give up again. My latest thing is I've been trying to meditate every day, and I did really well for like 5 weeks. I meditated every single day, and then I fell off the wagon and I haven't done it in like a week. And then I wake up and I'm like, I'm so bummed. So this morning, instead of like thinking like, oh my God, I need to meditate for 15 minutes, which is what I was committed to, I said, I really only have 3 minutes before I have to go somewhere. So I did that, right? So just remember, what is your reward system, and what's keeping you committed to getting your paperwork organized? And sometimes you may only have a couple of minutes to make something happen with it, right? So just commit that you don't need to have hours worth of time. Even if you just make better decisions about your incoming mail when you get it. Are you getting rid of just the junk mail right away, or are you filing on your monthly filing just regularly with what you currently have? Like, commit to just starting today. And you can always work into the backlog when you have time. But if you're starting right now and you're moving forward and you're just taking little baby steps into the future, you're going to be so much better off than you were before. So, we tend to be perfectionists, and we tend to be all or nothing. And I personally am trying to work really hard at that. So, the 3 minutes of meditation was not 15 minutes, but it felt so good. I woke up and I got out of bed and I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited, because I feel like I'm back on again, right? And so tomorrow, maybe I can give it a little bit more time. And then, I just can keep increasing that again. And the point is to feel like you're making positive steps towards your goals. So, and that's what the book Power of Habit is all about, right? How do you develop good habits, and how do you sustain those habits long-term? So there's a whole module into the student portal about that, if you're interested in that. We talked about brain-based challenges and how that impacts your filing system. And I think one thing to always remember is that, a lot of my ADD clients tend to make things super complicated. And super complicated means it just never gets done. So I want you to really hold back on when you're creating a filing system to not just super complicate the process, right? Just think about how you can broadly commingle things together. We're going to talk a little bit about it today on, naming conventions and commingling and whatnot. So, and maybe help you through that process a little bit, but just really try to simplify the process in that way. I get a lot from people that are like, well, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. And my one tip there is that I really feel very adamant, and I have helped enough people to know by now that if you trust the system, right, if you commit to filing the paperwork in the way that you have committed to, whenever you need it, it will be there. So you do have to do a little bit of an exercise around overcoming the fear of losing things permanently. But if you have simple filing systems, if you used good naming conventions, if you're consistent on where you're putting the paperwork, eventually it becomes a habit, and then eventually you can find things because you're doing it a little bit more systematically and automatic. So keep that in mind as we go through this process, because the weird monkey that lives in our head we'll always keep reminding us of how we want to complicate things, or how we're not really good at it, or how, you know, it didn't work in the past, or whatever it is that it's going to keep telling you. And the, you know, the good monkey in our head needs to remind us that we're learning something different, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but with time, it's going to become more natural for us. So I talked about that. We talked about questions. So last time I forgot to talk about the supply list, which was on my agenda. So I'm going to share that. No, I'm not going to share that. I need to open that first. So we're going to talk about no. Visuals. Okay. Slideshow. There we go. All right. So one thing about supplies that I want to, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but like, who hasn't gone to the store and got completely overwhelmed about what's available, right? Every time I go to Office Depot, or I don't even go to Target anymore in their supply department, because I end up with a ton of things I don't need or don't want. So I gave you a very specific list of things that I suggest that you're going to need, but try not to get bogged down on like all kinds of supplies that you may not need or want. And, you know, sometimes it's a form of procrastination. I try to like eliminate all of the things that we can. So just stick to the basics. Don't get caught up by the visual distraction. So, you know, there are a lot of options, can be very overloaded. I hear people saying, well, I didn't know which one to get, so I didn't get anything at all, and therefore I can't file, right? Try not to get caught up on that. So much product distraction happening. I see people with all kinds of bins and things that they're buying because they're like, oh my God, I really need this. This is the thing that's going to make me organized. And it's not necessarily the thing that's going to make you organized. It's just the process and the system that's way more important than the product. So if you already have a whole bunch of stuff at home, let's try to get through that first before you go off and you buy a whole bunch of more products. I did get a couple of emails from people that they really wanted the, you know, the product list, and I hope you bought some products, but don't get overloaded by it. There are lots of fancy products out there. You don't need it. You know, there are lots of options out there. Once again, you don't really need it. I gave you a list of products that that I love, and those are my favorite products. Those are the products that I carry with me, that I give them to my clients. So, you know, nothing is fancy about it. Sometimes at this point, I don't get an affiliate commission from any of those products, but at times I do receive free things from people because I buy so many of them and I refer them to people. So that's my disclaimer. Hanging files is my favorite thing. I had a lovely argument with somebody not that long ago about manila folders. I have nothing against manila folders. I think they're, you know, beautiful, fine, functional. I just like doing all of the things that I normally work on hanging files, and that's just because to me they're like really practical. They're really clean. You're going to be using some big tabs, so it makes things really easy. A lot of the times I don't really like a lot of color or anything like that. Sometimes I work with people and they want to color code different things. So, you know, there are lots of colored options, but the majority of the stuff I give people is just plain green. This is my go-to Smeed, but they come in red and they come in green and they come in blue. And here's some manila folders if you like some, you know. These are my favorite tabs, and they're the 1/3 cut tabs. And I just love them because as I get older, things are difficult to read. And so I like big, bold, simple, and they give you a lot of space. So whenever you buy your hanging files, they may as well come with an option for 1/3 tab, so you can pick that instead of, if you're reusing the hanging files you already have, then you can just purchase the tabs separately, and then you can use those to write you know, the names of your files. It's super easy to use and cut. If you're printing massive amounts of labels for like this filing system that you're creating that's brand new, you may want to just type them up and print them on these like Avery, sticky labels. I gave you in the Student Center templates for the monthly and the tax and everything that you need to print. So it would be super easy to use that. If you want to get a label maker and be fancy, you can do that as well. I'm going to show you the label maker that I love. But these would be super, they're super easy to use. They're not very expensive at all. And then you have a whole bunch of supplies in the future when you actually need to create more labels. So I love sticky notes. I actually don't have as many sticky notes as I used to have. I just recently donated a whole bunch of them. But I, at any given point, probably have more sticky notes than any human beings should have. But I use them a lot. I am very green, but I like to recycle. However, I still like sticky notes. I use them as like my little stubby list, and stubby list would be like something super simple. Like I will put 2 or 3 items that I'm like hyper focusing on and that I'm working on. So at any given time, I'll go on my big long to-do list, and then I write 2 or 3 things in my stubby. Then I'll work through my way to that, and I peel that off, and then I create a new one. So that's one way I use these sticky notes. But when you're sorting through your paperwork, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, I use sticky notes to pre-categorize some of the stuff that I'm working on before I actually go on and create labels. So it just helps separate your paperwork. It helps you remind what you're working on, because how often do you create a pile and you're like, what's in here? Because you may forget, and then you start confusing things and you start mixing them together. So write on a sticky note, put in front of it or put on the side of it, so that way it can help you remember what you're working on the piece of paper. It will also remind you that you have already sorted through that pile, so you may not go sorting through all the same piles all over again. This is just a plain filing bin. So I don't know how often I work with people and they don't even have a filing cabinet. So this is just plain clear. It will help you keep your paperwork organized until you can figure out a long-term solution for it. It's also great for storing things in the basement or in the attic. I love to do plastic because it's waterproof. So if you had a leak in the basement or if you had a leak in the attic, your paperwork would still be safe. If you're putting things like your taxes or, memorabilia or things like that, it will just keep that stuff safe in the attic or the basement. Everybody should have a recycling bin because, we have a lot of paper, trash bags. So that's my spiel on that, on supplies. Let's see. Just a quick show of my label maker because, no, did it wrong. Maybe one day I'll learn how to do this without messing it up. Okay, here we go. So label makers they can be very complicated. Why is this thing not working? Label makers can be very complicated and they can be very simple. This is my first label maker when I started organizing. And I ran out of label ink in this label maker. I used it for so many years and it was great. The only thing I didn't love about it, which I think they have changed now, is that the tape itself was paper back when I was using it. And so with time they faded it and started curling on the end. So I don't like that. But this is a great label maker. It's probably under $10. And if you're not going to use a ton of it, it's great. The only problem is, once again, you can't replace the ink. And I ran out of ink, which is they were like, we have never seen anybody run out of ink before, but I ran out of ink. But I was using the thing a lot. So once again, there's really fancy things that you can put on your desktop and you can print it. I mean, these things can go for thousands of dollars. I don't necessarily recommend it. I don't like it that it's not mobile. So this is my favorite one. This is the one I currently use, and I bought mine at Costco, and on and off they do a sale. They will be, you know, under $30. They come with tape. They come with the plastic tape that I love, so it doesn't curl, it doesn't fade. It's fabulous. It's got all kinds of fonts. You can get really fancy, but they're plain, boring font. It's like super easy to read. I love it that you can see from really far away. So I worked with a client one time, and she bought one, and then I came back the next day and she literally had labeled like everything around the house. I was like, you really love your label maker, don't you? And she was like, yes, I love to see where things are and where, you know, I don't have to think about like, where is my blah, blah, blah. I can visually see it and I love it. So if you want to go that crazy, you can. It's an awesome label maker. So I think that's about it on the label maker from Costco. It's like super easy to use. So then there's just and there's like a summary price list in the Student Center, which tells you all these things are if you wanted to just get your own. So that's that. So today I do have an agenda. So we're going to talk about, and I should cross it off because I didn't do a very good job the last time by not crossing things off my list. So I want to talk about, I'll close some chunk out of here. So I want to talk about how I use Post-it notes, because I know it sounds really basic, but I think when I shared this with people, sometimes they're like, oh, I never thought about using it that way. So I want to just spend a few minutes talking about it. So I already told you I love color. So when you start sorting your paperwork, right, you're invariably going to end up with these piles everywhere. And it always happens. People forget what they are. So that part of sorting can be very frustrating, and it can take a lot of brain power, and it's a lot of decisions. And as you get through the process, you don't want to just be looking at piles and being like, what does this mean? What did I do with it? What is it going? What have I decided on? You want to help yourself by using some sticky notes. And the way I love using them, and it's super easy to use. So when you have sticky notes, they're going to have on the bottom, they're going to have glue, and on the top, they're going to be plain. So basically I just write on the non-glue side, which is like the top. So as you can see in my presentation, we'll say things like travel and gifts and to-dos, and then I just stack the piles, and then as I need to, I'll insert the paper in between. So my filing system kind of grows, and then all of the paper can be grouped together. By using sticky notes, by using sticky notes, you don't have to make a whole bunch of labels and then decide you don't like them, right? So I tend to do it this way when I'm creating my temporary tabs. It's super easy to use, and if you decide you don't like the terminology, you can peel the sticky off and you can write a new one, and that's completely fine without having to waste all of the time and label to, create fancy ones. I like to write big, and I recommend writing big. So take a Sharpie and use that instead of like scribbly pencil where you're like, what did I write there? Just be very descript, write in big words, and make sure that you can read what it says. I know it sounds really basic, but I don't know how many times I work with people and they're like, I can't read what I said. What does it say? I can't remember. And now we have to sort through the whole pile again to remind ourselves what it is. So as you're going through this process, right, some categories are going to become very obvious, and they're going to look like this is a category by itself. This is the thing it needs to be. There's going to be no commingling. I'm very particular about that. But there are some categories that are going to start blending together, right? And we talked about self-care, which I think is probably one of the biggest things that I see in my clients. And self-care really could probably be somewhat broad, because there's a lot of things that you're just keeping just for the sake of reading at some point into the future, but you don't necessarily really need it right then, right there. You may not need a whole folder for just yoga, right? Because it's like if you're doing research about yoga, or if you are doing yoga, once you get to it, then you don't really may need the paperwork anymore, because you are now doing the thing that you researched about. So the paperwork is just like an FYI, I still may need it one day. So the example I'm using here is cooking, because once again, so I see a lot of people with like recipes and things that they're doing and keeping that, you know, they want to put in their filing system. So cooking may be a broad category, right? You may not need a section for entrees and soups and crock pot recipes. They may all just be able to go together. But as you're collecting them from your desk, from your kitchen, from your dining room, from your living room, it will help to have this section all together. And then you can make a decision. If you have like 50 crock pot recipes, you may need its own filing system. But if you only had 2 crock pot recipes, 1 soup recipe, you know, 1 cooking recipe that you like, they could very well just all go together and you could easily find them. So keep that in mind as you go into that process. Okay, so that's my thing on sticky notes and how much I love them. Moving right along here. Let's see, are there any questions? No questions, okay. Please forget to share first. Here we go. So one important question as you're going through your paperwork that you should be asking yourself is really, how will you use this piece of paper? There's nothing more important than understanding why you're keeping something, right? Is it related to your home? Does it belong into your long-term files? Does it go with, you know, does it go with your kids? Does it go with the IRS? Is it something that you think that you may need later? Is it something that you have no idea why you're keeping? Is it something that goes with, you know, your parents? Is it something that you want to buy? Why are you keeping that piece of paper? I want you to ask that question to yourself regularly when you're sorting through piece of paper, especially when you're like, oh, here's that thing that I printed it from the internet. And now you're stuck, right? Because you're like, I don't know why I printed this. So ask yourself, how am I going to use this piece of paper? And the answer may be like, well, it was research, and I would like to, you know, I would like to go to yoga once a week. But there are so many types, and I don't even understand the difference. So I've printed all of this paperwork about yoga, and now I have learned all of theirs about yoga. And mind you that, you know, this is a really bad example because I don't know all there is to know about yoga. I do know that there are a lot of different yogas, but, you know, there could be, you know, lots of research to be done. And then I'm just going to put it in my self-care file. And maybe one day, or maybe not, I may go back and figure out which yoga I want to do and which class I want to take and why do I want that particular yoga. But the thing may also be like, okay, I really want to go to yoga. I have no idea what types of a yoga I want to go to because I don't understand the difference. So I'm researching all kinds of yoga. So I'm printing all of this paperwork. And then I read all there is to know about yoga. And I finally figured out that I just want to go to hot yoga, right? And no hate mail because once again, I don't understand the different kinds of yoga. This is just an example. But I decided I want to go to hot yoga. So great. I arrived at the place where I've made a decision about all of the research. I don't need to keep all of the other pieces of paper, right? So I may be able to dispose of all the things that I researched except the hot yoga because that's the final decision that I'm taking. So how will I use this piece of paper? Well, that's the thing I want to do. So I want to save that so I can have that information. So I hope it makes sense, right? When you're asking the question, how will I use this piece of paper? What am I going to do with it? It will help you make decisions about the paper because that's the part where we get stuck and we don't know why we're keeping it. So then it's hard to make a decision. So it's always important to ask, like, is this important? You know, is this important to me? How is this piece of paper going to impact my family? Will it, you know, how will it help me move forward? What is it doing? You know, what is it the impact to my life? And if you can answer that educatedly, you probably can make good decisions about your piece of paper. So identify what the paper is and then go one step further and ask yourself, how will I use this piece of paper, right? And what is the value of it? So whenever you get stuck in the process, so you're like, okay, well, I received this piece of paper and I don't know how I'll use it. Then keep going, ask another question, right? How is this piece of paper impact me in the future? And how is this piece of paper going to be of value to me? And keep asking questions until you arrive at some valued answer to you that helps you make a decision about this piece of paper. And mind you that a lot of the paperwork that you have will be super easy to make a decision about. It's just a matter of like processing the paperwork. There's always going to be a stack of paper that you're like, I have no idea what this is. And I don't have a clue why I'm keeping it. And I have no idea what the value of it is to me, to my family. I just know I need to keep it, right? And so in the last part of this class, we're going to take questions about some of these things that you may have. And I'm going to try to help you through the process of figuring it out. And today, before we finish, I'm going to go through a whole pile of it that I asked my friends and my family to send me some of the odd things they had that they had no idea what to do with. And maybe we can, maybe it'll give you some ideas of some of the things that people get stuck on that, you know, that you probably don't really need it anyways. So the list is never, you know, exclusive, and it's extensive, but it's never exclusive. Every time I do this, or every time I work with people, they will ask me something and I'm like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. So then there's a new thing to solve for. So if you can't think of a future value of a piece of paper, there's a good chance that you probably don't need it. So it can be recycled or shredded. So mostly today we're going to talk about your monthly files, and we're going to talk about mostly about your monthly files, because that, as you start sorting through your paperwork, 80% of the paperwork that you're going to come across probably belongs in your monthly files. So as you know, as you set up a filing system, it will be really helpful for you to just kind of go through that and have that system set up as you kind of layer your way into having a new filing system. So what I say is that what goes in your monthly file is anything and everything that has no long-term value to you. So there will be, you know, think of them, once again, these are all the things that people send to you because you owe them money, and then you pay them, and then you're good to go, right? So there will be a lot of utility bills, there'll be a lot of statements, there'll be a lot of FYI letters. And this is a little bit of a sample of one that I did for my client, Kathy. And she had certain things that were, so if you look in the front end, that's her monthly filing system. And this client has very little paper that she likes to keep. So she throws a lot of these FYI pieces of paper in the trash just because she doesn't like keeping them. But however, she only had one drawer space that she wanted to keep. So there were other things that she felt like were more important for her to use the space, right? Like her hobbies and her jokes. Like it's an extensive file that she has with funny things, and her, you know, her jewelry, and she travels a lot. So that was an important thing to her. So she compromised on keeping all of the FYIs so she could have other things. But as you're going through the process and you start sorting through your desk and through the piles of paper around your home and your office and whatnot, you know, the sticky notes will help you kind of create these categories. And sometimes I am not a person that likes to have flat paper just everywhere. So I tend to get a clear bin. I put some hanging files in there. I make myself some temporary tabs, right, which will start looking exactly like this filing system looks. But I will start creating some temporary files. And then as I'm sorting through this stuff, I can start putting that stuff where it belongs. And it helps visually kind of clear the space a little bit easier. Because it's not uncommon that I will go work with people and their filing system is so jam-packed that you can't add one more piece of paper in there. So you got to start somewhere, and normally as you're going through the process, you need to free up some space before you can actually put stuff away. So having a filing bin that you can start putting that stuff that you're finding everywhere is also a good place to start off with. So I also tell people, like, if you don't want to use the tabs and you don't want to create sticky notes, maybe you should start a list with some of the categories that you feel like are going to need to be in your permanent filing system, or with your taxes, or whatever it is that you feel like that you need. So it will help you kind of start thinking about, like, what does my document tree looks like, right? What are some of the files that are important to me? It will also give you a framework to say, well, okay, maybe, she doesn't have anything over here that I probably would commingle together. Well, she does. Like, maybe she has travel in Europe and the US. Could all of the travel paperwork just go together, because there aren't that many in there, right? Instead of separating Europe and US and then having a separate travel for just random things, could all those 3 files be combined into just one file and then have it all together? The answer there is probably yes. She didn't have that much, but she was very particular about wanting those 3 files, and because she had already compromised in so many other files, I felt like, why not, right? She's giving up other things to have the space, so it's not like she's having 5 drawers of just travel things that she's never going to use. So we're also going to talk a little bit about the IRS filing system that I suggest for people. It's very important to remember that, filing the paperwork that you're keeping for the IRS is based on when you actually file your taxes. So we're currently in the year of 2017. So we all filed our 2016 taxes on this year. The majority of us did. But if you haven't filed your taxes yet, and let's say you missed the October deadline and you don't get to file your 2016 taxes until 2018, well, you have to bump the amount of time you have to keep your taxes by a couple of years, right? Because now you were delayed by almost 2 years by filing your taxes. So you are required to keep the paperwork longer. So keep that in mind as you're going through this process, that, your situation may be a little bit different than what I'm suggesting, and it is based on when you filed your taxes. So we are not going to spend a ton of time. A lot of my clients are business owners, so I get this question a lot, like, how are my business files going to be impacted by this? They're not. I would highly recommend you keep your business files completely separate from your personal files. It prevents paperwork from getting misfiled, even if it is a completely different drawer. There are some of the principles that you're learning through this class, they're definitely going to apply to your business files. Like, you could use a monthly, just like you're using it for your personal, you could use that for your business, but clearly you're not going to throw that away every month, right? Because those will be your monthly paperwork. So you can basically throw all of your business monthlies into one file, and then at the end of the month you can reconcile, and then you can file it away permanently, and then you have to keep that paperwork for like 7 years if you own a business in the US. Once again, assuming that you're filing your taxes on time. So not a ton about your business filing, but a lot of the same principles would apply. Just keep things simple, maybe commingle if you can. Keep everything separated by month for your accounting and whatnot, and then file for your taxes basically the same way we're going to talk about your personal. So, all right. So how will you use that piece of paper? It's a really important question to ask, because if you don't understand what the goal is about that piece of paper, you're probably going to keep things way longer than you need, right? Because you don't really understand what the value of that piece of paper is. So next, we're going to talk about being ruthless and not being reckless. And oh, I did it again. I'm just worthless on this process. Okay, let's share my screen. Here we go. Maybe by the end of week 4, I totally get this straight. Okay, so being ruthless and not reckless. So I didn't come up with this. I read it somewhere, and my apologies because I'm horrible about remembering where I read things. I read so much all the time that, you know, I don't have the best of memories to quote people. So this is not mine, this is somebody else, but I don't know who to credit. But anyway, so when you are reckless, you're just basically unconcerned about the consequences of your actions. You're just doing things without caution. You're being careless. You know, you're basically being carelessness. You're having a lot of carelessness when you're processing your paperwork. So I don't want you to be doing that, right? I don't want you to just be sorting and just feeling like, well, this has been here for so long, I don't really need this stuff, I'm just going to throw it all away. I have worked with people in the past that have done that, and then of course I never throw anything away without looking through it, and I will look through the pile. They were like, well, this is just junk mail, and before you know it, I have found, you know, their birth certificate or their passports or, you know, family pictures and other really important things that they really needed and wanted it, but because they were being reckless and they just couldn't make any more decisions, they could have thrown it away. I believe in this process. If you're being reckless, when you finish and you can't find something, you're going to have this unsettled feeling about, oh my God, I threw my passport away, right? Because I didn't sort through everything carefully and I didn't make good decisions for myself. However, if you are going through the process and you're making good decisions and you're touching everything and you're thinking about what you're doing, whenever you finish, if you can't find your passport, you're going to feel certain that you didn't throw it away because you didn't just pick any random pile from somewhere and just throw it in the trash, right? You actually went through everything and you made good decisions. So that means your passport will be somewhere safe. It's just not in the paperwork that you have sorted through. So sometimes I work with people and I think they're, you know, through the process, you can get fatigued because you're going to be making a lot of decisions. If you start feeling like, I don't really need to go through this, just stop the process immediately, right? You have become reckless and you're no longer going to be doing your filing system any good. Go take a break, go outside, you know, take a walk around the block, go get a drink of water. Maybe listen to your favorite music and have a dance party in your living room or your office. Like, do something to distract your brain so maybe you can get back some of your energy and then you can go back to the process again. Or maybe it's just, you know, you're finally done with it for that day and you just need to come back to it at a different time. Don't just start just throwing stuff away because you're going to regret that. So when you are being ruthless, on the other hand, you are just, you know, you are without pity or compassion. You're being cruel and merciless and unrelenting, and you're adamant about what you're doing, right? And you are relentless in the process, which is all good things to do when you're considering, why are you keeping this piece of paper? You are evaluating the usefulness of every piece of paper, and you're getting rid of those that you're hanging on just in case, right? We have a lot of paperwork we're hanging on to just in case. And you're going to start making decisions on that paperwork that represents an action or a decision that you have been avoiding. So you want to make sure that you're making decisions about what that piece of paper is doing. I work with people a lot and they're like, well, I can't make a decision, so I'll just put it here for now, right? And that I'll put it here for now just becomes a bigger pile and a bigger pile, and then you never go back to it because now it's overwhelming. As you're going through this process, that is likely to happen, right? Because you're making so many decisions, you're going to end up with things that you don't know what to do. So create a pile of things that I don't know what to do with, and then commit to going, you know, not making the pile any bigger than like an inch, right? Once you get to that point, go back to the pile again and start making decisions again, right? One of my clients coined this terminology, and she calls it multi-view devaluation. So the first time you see a piece of paper, you're like, oh my God, I've been looking for this. I can't believe it was buried in the bottom of the pile. I really wanted this piece of paper. And then the second time you see it, you're like, okay, well, that piece of paper was really useful when I printed it. I am really sad that I didn't have it when I really needed it. But now the usefulness has passed. I no longer really need this piece of paper. So I can't quite throw it away yet, though, but I'm going to think about it a little bit more. So it goes back to the, I don't know what to do with pile. And then by the third time you look at the piece of paper, you have made a decision that this piece of paper is no longer useful to you. You just printed it. You had some information on it. The information is no longer useful, and now you can let go. But you want to keep making decisions constantly, right? As you get stuck, and you don't want to be in constant avoidance of making decisions, and you don't want to just be recklessly throwing things away. So you want to find a good balance about making sure you're making fast and quick decisions, and you're being ruthless about the paperwork, but you're not just making decisions and being reckless and just throwing things away because you don't want to make decisions anymore. So the success of your paperwork and the success of your filing system really depends on it, right? You want to create good piles. You want to make good decisions. You want to walk away feeling, I didn't throw away anything recklessly that might have been important to me because I wanted to avoid going through that pile. So find good balance. And if you get stuck and you start feeling overwhelmed, I highly recommend taking a break. Okay, so that covers that. Next, we're going to talk about naming convention. And naming convention is just a fancy words about what you're going to name your files. So naming convention is really important because, funny story, I keep saying recently, but it's been within the last year, I worked with somebody, and her paperwork was not completely out of control. She did have a little bit of chaos happening that she couldn't find anything, but one of the big problems she had is that things were just not named consistently. So for one example, she had 5 files that were items that were related to her car, right? So she had one that was called Jetta, she had one that was called car, she had one that was called vehicle, she had one for tickets and parking tickets, and then she had one for I don't know, some other random thing, the title of the car. And to me, all of those things could have been combined, but the thing was that she couldn't remember what she had called the file, so she just kept making other files, right? Which happens a lot. I see a lot of duplication of files in my client's filing system, and my research says my guerrilla research says that the reason why that's happening is because they're not using words that they can actually remember what those words are. I drive a Ford, and I say, I have a Ford Transit. When I'm making my filing system, if I said Ford, I might forget that, right? Because my car is really a Transit Connect. And that's the thing I call it. That's the thing I refer to it. So if I created a file named car, that may be in the beginning of the filing system, but I'd be looking for Transit Connect, which is towards the end of the filing system. I may never find that file, so I may be likely to create other files to replace this. And then every time they ended up in different places, right? So you want to avoid that. In this process, you want to follow your instinct, right? If you normally say things this is if you like to put all your financial files in, let's say, a piggy bank file, right? Then go with your instinct. If you're calling that a piggy bank instead of financial, call it a piggy bank. Don't try to be fancy around the words that you're using. This is your filing system. Unlikely anybody's going to be looking through it but you. So use words that are familiar to you, that make sense to you, that make sense to your brain. So you'll be much more likely to find them than if you're trying to fancy speak in your filing system, and then you'll never find anything. So I already said that. So naming convention also helps you create the structure that you're going to create your filing system, right? So having a structured system is really helpful, because if you, I don't know how many times I see filing systems and they're just all over the place. Like, you know, like one file, like the first file will be like for their home, and then the second file will be for their kid, and then the third file will be for their car, and then the fourth file is like they're remodeling, and then the fifth file is like, you know, I don't know, their manuals, and everything is just like everywhere, right? Because of the way they're labeling things. They're using it as some sort of a random alphabetic thing that they're, you know, organizing their files with. I believe in creating a real serious structure around how you're naming your files, and then creating blocks of those files. So when you're thinking about something, like if you're thinking about your house and all of the things that go with your house, all of those things are grouped together, right? When you're thinking about your car or your motorcycle, all of those things are grouped together. When you're thinking about the people and your family and all of the things that go with them, like, you know, like I would have a file for medical, and I would have a file for professional, and I may have a file for, you know, self-care. All of those things that belong to me are kind of together. So having good naming conventions will allow you to create a good structure for how is it that you're going to, you know, it's like you're almost creating a grid for your filing system that it makes sense. Imagine if we were just randomly building highways and then not planning it ahead, and then eventually the streets would never go where they're supposed to go, and they never meet where they need to meet. I live in a fast-growing county, and they have been building roads here for over 15 years. And now sometimes they connect roads together, and I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. You know, all of these communities got built, but the space for the road is still there because there was a lot of plan in advance that happened. And so now they can connect these things that were planned way, you know, 20 years ago around the streets. So you have to think of your filing system kind of the same way. Like, how are some of these things connected, and how are they going to go, and how is my brain going to remember it? I know it's a lot of pre-thought to what is it going to look like and what is it going to feel like. However, if you put a little bit of thought of it in the front end, it will help you in the back end forever, and then you'll never have to create another filing system again, right? And I think that is one of the reasons why a lot of my clients have filing systems that have completely failed them. It's because they are just basically mishmash of things that they threw together over the years, and then you just keep throwing more things together, and then you just keep adding more files, and then you just keep putting more things. And there's never like a concrete foundation for the filing system to begin with. And so you find, you know, I find that people are just all over the place, and nothing has ever really meshed together, and nothing really has a cohesive plan or process. And so this is going to give you a good foundation to start off with. So as you're adding onto your filing system, you are not all over the place. So always allow for your brain to remember what is there. Like, I can't say this enough. Speak in simple ways. Write your filing system in simple ways. Use words that you will remember, that it makes sense to you. Like, go with your instinct when you're doing this. Because the most important thing of filing systems is so you can find your paperwork later when you actually need it, right? It's not about the actual filing has to be super easy, and it has to happen really fast. But the ultimate goal is to find our paperwork when we actually need it. And it may not be until late into the future when you actually like, where is that piece of paper that I named, you know, my car. Well, I don't have a car. I have a transit, right? So it prevents my brain from running around in circles trying to remember what did I call that file. And my filing system is super simple, right? If I had called it a car or a vehicle or a Ford and not a transit, I could, within the, you know, the one drawer that it's in, I could file it and I could find it. However, I work with clients that will have paperwork in 12 different locations because that's how it ended up. And because they're fancy speaking and they're labeling, they can never find anything. So you want to avoid that. So standard rules of naming convention is so I always avoid trying to give people, like, you know, these super standard things that are available out of the box, just because I don't know that it always works for people. But the way I normally group things together now, and I've been doing this probably, you know, when I started organizing, I was giving people A through Z filing systems, and I was probably helping people keep way more paperwork than they needed to keep. And then with time, I kind of wised up and did some research, and I figured people really didn't need to keep as much as they were keeping. And I'm thinking, how are they going to remember where to go find the stuff? And so I created these zones, which I now use a lot, right? Once again, it's like your home, it's your people, it's your, you know, your home and your things, right? It's your people. And then it's like your, it's your finances or whatever. So I try to keep it like 3 sections of like the very basics, you know, and then there's your monthly, and then there are your taxes. So it's kind of boils down to a 5-part system. And the less words you have, the more simplified you are, the better off you are. So consistency allows you to understand your filing system, and it allows others to also understand your filing system, because that's important. If you live in a house with other people, you want them to be able to go find something in your filing system or go file something over there, and not be like, what does she mean by that? What does that word stand for? Or what does that thing say? Or, you know, you don't want that to happen in the filing system. So you want to make sure, you want to avoid confusion. You want to avoid people creating more files or yourself creating more files by not making it complicated. You want to pay a lot of attention to abbreviations, right? Sometimes, like, the way you abbreviate things may not make any sense to you. I have worked with people that have abbreviated things, and I'm like, what does this mean? And they're like, no idea. No idea what I said. No idea what that means. No idea why that piece of paper is inside, right? So it's wasted space. So if you're using something that has, excuse me, if you're using something that has like dates on it, like your car, the car is a perfect example. Your taxes may be a perfect example. Like, will you put the year on it? Like, I have a 2015 Transit Connect. And I put the year on it just because, you know, it makes sense to me. It's easy to identify. Let's say I bought another Transit Connect for my business. I could easily name it a different year, right? So things don't get confused. They are like, my neighbors have the exact same car, the exact same color, that they bought the exact same year. I wonder what their filing system looks like, right? Maybe they named it his car, her car, right? So however it helps you figure it out, that may be important. With your taxes, it's probably really important to put the year on it, because, you know, every tax year is basically the same. So that is one important item to identify one year from the others. When you're, once again, when you're abbreviating, what are the words that you're abbreviating? Do you understand the abbreviation? Do you understand what that means? So, not to beat the dead horse with the naming convention, but is it a car? Is it a vehicle? Is it an automobile? Is it transportation? You know, is it a camper? Do you name your car? My friend Tracy names her car Trixie, right? So if she created a file that's called car, she probably would never find it because she knows of it as Trixie. So how are you using those words? It's very important. And if you're using the sticky notes, right, you can start off as car, and oops, just dropped my pen. You can start off as car, and then you can cross it off and say, no, I don't really have a car, I really have a Ford. And then you can cross it off and say, no, it's really a Transit, right? So you can use your sticky note to kind of like brainstorm what is it that you're going to call that file in a way that your brain really remembers it. Filing doesn't have anything to do with the way we put it away, so I can't say this enough again. It has a lot to do with how are you going to find it, because that is the worst part of the process, right? Once you go through this entire process of like sorting and organizing all of the paperwork in your office, which is a lot usually, are you going to remember what you call the file, and are you going to remember to go locate that piece of paper whenever you need it? And that is the most important part of the process, because if you go through all of this and you still can't file, you still cannot find your paperwork, then we have failed the process somewhere along the way. So any questions about naming conventions? Let's see. No questions. Okay, moving right along then. So I'm gonna show you the template. Okay, so here's the templates that you have available in the Student Center, and it's in the Avery format, so it's ready to go and ready to print. If you wanted to change the font, you can just, you know, Control A or Command A, depending on what you're using. You can change the font up here. We can pick whatever fancy font you want. You can change the size if you want it bigger. And you can, you know, that would be easy to use. So we created some terminology here. This probably doesn't even apply to any of you, but you know, so you can then type up your own stuff here, and there's plenty more. So it's easy to print. We gave you some taxes tabs as well, so you can start getting that paperwork ready. So this is available in the Student Center. It's easy to go. Let's see what else I have here. Oh, yeah, show you that too. So in the last class, we talked about how I gave you these, I gave you these to-do lists, and it's also in the Student Center in the week one. Because as you start sorting through your paperwork, you're going to find all of these things that you're supposed to action that you haven't actioned before. So I have two recommendations there. One is create a pile of things that you need to action, and then as you find a piece of paper, right? So if this is my agenda, and then I need to, you know, I need to like mail it to my sister with a thank you note, I'm going to take out a sticky note, and I'm going to say mail to sister, write a note, and then I'm going to stick that to the piece of paper, and then I'm going to put it in my action pile. And as I go through the pile, right, I can know easily what's happening there. So that's one way of dealing with the actions that you're going to find as you go through it. I would put them in a safe location, right? Create one action pile and know where that is. So as you're going through your paperwork, you know where that action pile is. The second way to handle this would be to create a to-do list, right? And so I gave you that task list, and then you can add your things that you need to do in there. And then when you're ready to action some of that stuff off, then you have all of your actions in one piece of paper. But these were some fun tags that I just thought I created just in case you wanted to add some fun things to your, you know, to your to-do list. And these are also on Avery format, so they can just be printed and it's easy to go. If you wanted one of your tasks to be like to sort, or I only give you one shop. So to shop or to watch the videos for the class or to create files or, you know, to define goals. You know, I have mantras for a lot of things that I do because sometimes things get really boring. And if I don't self-talk in a good way, I don't get anything accomplished. But I also gave you like, I'm organized, right? It goes with a little bit with the mindset. You know, just write yourself some new ones too. It's a new me. And, you know, I just created some fun stuff that I thought would be fun to put that on your to-do list. So when you're doing this stuff and you're feeling like, I hate this, I can't believe I'm doing this, you know, why do I have to get my office organized? It's a little bit of a treat for you. So that's available in the Student Center. So now we're going to get to like the meaty part of this. So let's get a drink and we're going to talk about our permanent filing system. We're going to talk about our monthly filing system and what that looks like. And I'm going to show you, you know what, I'm going to show you, I'm going to start with my presentation. I'm going to get out of the presentation. I'm going to show you the bins and then we'll go back to it. Oh, I am horrible at this. Here we go. Here we go. You guys are the best. I don't see anybody yelling at me over here. Here's my chat box. You guys are really quiet. Must be either like fully engaging and entertaining you or boring you to death that you're napping. I hope it's not the latter. Anyway, so your personal record retention. So everything you need to know about everything that I'm telling you here, right? It's summarized in the record retention guideline that I gave you. It's included. It's about, you know, 5 or 6 pages, four pages long. It's simplified by everything that you're going to go through, but I'm going to visually show it to you because I'm very visual. And if I see things, I'm much more likely to learn it than if I just read about it. So I also want to check my list here and make sure that I'm on track before I start that. So I'm going to move this. Okay. So when you start working through your desk, right? Remember I said pick any pile. The oldest piles are normally the betters because they have aged themselves out. So I would probably not start on your desk. Those tend to be the earliest pieces of paper you have received. Go find a corner somewhere where you've been shoving paperwork and then start with that area. So as far as your monthly files are concerned, the first step is to find a container that you can put that stuff in. So if you're going to have a clear bin or a banker's box or whatever you're going to put it, a shoe box, whatever it is that you need to, it's totally cool. The second thing is you need to create some tabs, or whether you're going to create your regular monthly January through December tabs and then just insert them into the hanging files. That's one way. Whether you're going to create, you know, temporary with just sticky notes, that's another way. So the second, pick a pile, any pile, the older the better. And then the third thing you want to do is establish how long you want to keep this temporary pieces of paper that have no long-term value to you. So the system I'm giving you is for 1 year. So it says anything that is more than 12 months old, you no longer need it and you can throw it away, right? And if you really think about it, like, why would you need your utility bills for more than 12 months? And there's like 1% exception. I just recently worked with somebody and she was getting divorced and she needed to create a budget. So she needed all of her utility bills for like, you know, a couple of years. I have worked with people that have exceptions to this rule, but the majority of people are keeping way too much paperwork and they really don't need any of these bills for any longer than 1 year. So evaluate what your situation is and decide on whether 1 year is good enough for you. So if 1 year is good enough, then the January through December filing system will be just fine. If you need to keep it 2 years, then you can just use the same filing system, right? Maybe you can put the older in the back and the newer in the front, however it is that you want to do that, it's fine. Some people create two different. Don't get crazy. Really try to just disseminate whether 1 year is plenty, and then just try to go with that. So what that looks like is, I'm going to get out of this. I think I want to show you what that looks like. Stop sharing. Okay. So what that looks like is something like this. So for those of you that are on your phone, you're going to have to watch the video later. But don't worry, video will be here. So if you can see this, right, if you are using temporary, you can just write on the front part of this. But because I created a permanent, you don't need the stickies. So this is like January, February, covered, February, March, April, May, June, I pulled out July, August, September, October, November, and December. So I like staggering them. So see how super easy it is to see. These are like, you can see these from far away, and you can easily identify which month you're going to, and it's super easy to do that. So this actually contains all of my paperwork, my personal paperwork for the last year. And as you can see, it's taking a pretty good portion of this box, right? So I don't have kids, and it's just my husband and I and the dog. So our filing system tends to be a little bit more streamlined. So if we had more people that lived in this house, you can see how you can easily add more space to the paperwork. But if we really wanted to, we probably could do this in a half drawer worth of paperwork. But I like to have it in a bin. So I actually have this easily accessible. Remember how I talked about in my webinar, how people are not keeping these things in a place that it's easy to find. This is normally in an easy place for me to see it. So as soon as I read the mail, I can stick the paperwork in here. Some people need to have it in their kitchen. Some people need to have it in their office. Some people need to have it somewhere where they can see it, because this is the majority of the paperwork that you find everywhere in your home. So I'm going to go through my July file, which I found had some really, had a lot of paper in there that I felt like, oh, this is a good sampling of what you would see in a monthly file, right? It had a really good sampling of things. So it had like my grocery receipts. I went to the doctor, I made a payment, and then my insurance company sent me some money. So the receipt and the check that I received back is in here because I deposited the check and now I don't really need this anymore. My HVAC bill is in here. I have insurance statements in here. I have bank deposits in here, all the receipts that they give you when you give things to the teller. Lots of consumer receipts in here. Excuse me, I'm gonna take a drink. It's like PetSmart, dry cleaner, dinner, more groceries, Home Depot, food, IKEA, more groceries, the telephone and the cable bill, my car insurance statement, mortgage statement, my car payment, lots more groceries. I guess we eat a lot of food here. On the dollar store, right? More dinners, gas station, Costco. You kind of get a picture, right? I had a citation for parking because you can't go downtown and not get a ticket. This happens every time. I either have really good parking karma and I get really good parking, or I get a parking ticket. There's no in between. So if I don't find good parking, I just have to go to the garage because I know that the karma is on the other end. So check refunds, my paid stub, credit card statements, the electric bill, Really weird thing happened. I received a toll violation for a card that I don't even own. It was a $2 bill. So I paid the bill, and hopefully, you know, that will get itself resolved, because the process of getting this fixed was a lot of time. So I kept the receipt. I apply for a credit card. And what happens is I already had a credit card with the same company. So what they did was they gave me a different card that is like, you know, like it's an Amazon card. So I get rewards that way. But what they did is they reduced the balance, the available credit I had here to give me this card, which is fine with me. But they sent me a letter telling me that. So I kept the letter. Toys R Us, because I have lots of nieces and nephews that I like to treat to. The gas bill is here. There are some EOBs for my husband, you know, more pay stubs. The dog had her rabies shot, and then we had to re-register her with the county, so that receipt's here. You know, I had an insurance renewal, and they sent you all of these paraphernalia pieces of paper. Normally I throw this away, but I don't know why. I was feeling like, I don't know what to do with this. So my brain wasn't thinking, so I threw it in here while I was at it, but clearly I could have thrown that away. I broke down on the New Jersey Turnpike. I didn't break down. I had a flat tire going to my sister's graduation, and it turns out that my insurance company reimburses me for that service fee because I have roadside assistance. So all of the paperwork that I had to file to get that back is in here. More junk pieces of paper, more insurance. I think I already said electric bill. More bank deposits. So you kind of get a picture, right? The person that asked me about how thick this file is going to be. So that's about how thick it is for like a month worth of piece of paper. But once again, I said my filing system is pretty simple. I open every single piece of mail that comes in every single day. I know, don't freak out. My husband brings the mail in and he puts it on the counter, and it drives me nuts to look at it. So I basically read every mail that whenever I'm home. I read through it, and then I get rid of I get rid of the envelopes and the junk part of it. And then I get left with one piece of paper. All of the things that I know are FYI that I already paid for there, like debit pay or auto pay or withdrawal or whatever that is. I just come straight up, and then I just stick that in the month that it needs to go. And that's how big that file is. So I hope I'm not skipping around too much and I'm making some sense. So let's go through the process once again. So you come home, and I'm not going to assume that you're like sorting through your paperwork. I'm going to assume that you already have a filing system, and this is the process you would follow, right? So I come home every day, and then there's a pile of mail sitting on my counter. I open every piece of mail, and then I throw away everything that is not necessarily that, and it's not required. Those are the junk newsletters that people send to you. I throw those away. If it is a bill that I have to pay, I will clearly keep the envelope. But if I am paying it automatically online somewhere, I don't keep any of that. I throw all of that away. So after I finish reading all of my mail, I will end up with a pile of paper that is basically FYI pieces of paper, right? Those are all the things that I owe to people, and I'm going to pay them somehow, whether regular or whether electronically. So I go into my filing system, and we're currently in the month of October. So I would pull my file for October, and then I would stick all of those pieces of paper in there. So simply enough, I would just be reading through all of my mail, and about 80% of what I receive is FYI, right? And while I'm in the kitchen, I will be collecting the grocery receipts or the gas receipts or all of the things that may be laying around the counter that my husband is keeping that, it's just an FYI or it's just in case. And then he's just leaving them everywhere. And then I collect them, and then I put it in the monthly file. And then when he says to me, like, where's my Home Depot receipt? I say, this is where the Home Depot receipt is. And then we go there and find it. So the system is meant to be a revolving system. And what that means is, like, let's say next year, October comes around, I will go back in my October file. I will pull out all of the things that were in October, and we can do that right now as an example. So we pull out the October file, which is the current month we're in. And then I have, you know, a whole bunch of receipts in here. And then I would look through it and then just establish, no, I still don't need any of these things that are in here, right? I want to make sure that nothing got in here by mistake. No, I don't need my credit card statements. No, I don't need my phone bill. No, I don't need any of my EOBs. No, I don't need my my order deliveries. I don't need more receipts. I don't need any of this stuff over here. So I would take this. I like shredding. I normally shred just about everything that comes into my home, but I'm a little bit obsessive about that, and that's just a personal choice I make for myself. So I would take this pile to the shred pile, and then I would actually give it to somebody on my team, and then they shred it for me. But, you know, for a long time I had my own little shredder, and then I would just stick a few pieces of paper in there, and I would shred this pile up. And then it's fresh and clean and new for my new October pile, and then I can just start filing it again. So the point here is that every month, right, you would be pulling out a file from your filing system, and then you would be getting rid of last year's October paperwork, and then you'll be filing in some new October paperwork. And then every month you'll be adding some and taking some out. So your filing system never gets super stale with things from, you know, the end of times. I worked with a client a few years ago, and he had these boxes of paper, and on the box it said very important paperwork. And he graduated from an Ivy League school, moved to DC, eventually got married, had 3 kids. And I said to him, how long have you been moving these boxes? And he said, they're probably from my first job and when I moved here from the Northeast. And I said, well, you're not curious about what was inside? And he said, well, I just figured it said, important paperwork, and I wouldn't have written that unless they weren't important paperwork. And I said, okay. So we opened the boxes, and they were important paperwork, right? They were bank statement and taxes and utility bills and things that he had kept from when he was in school, and they were important at that particular time in his life, but they were no longer important like 15 years later. So this filing system would prevent you from having 3 boxes worth of paperwork that say they're very important, because they would force you to at some point get rid of them and not keep everything forever. So I hope this is making sense on what you're keeping over there. So the pile of paper that my friends and my family and my clients volunteered was kind of interesting, because a lot of this stuff I would have put in my monthly filing system anyway, but I was curious about, like, why are people confused? So I wanted to go over it with you, because I was like, I get it. So this is like a fancy return label receipt keeper. But it looks very fancy, right? So my client was like, oh, I feel like I should keep this. No, this is like a receipt, and it has directions to how to return your purchase. Once you decide you're going to keep the thing, you no longer need that. My neighbor is getting some service done, and the company that is doing work at their house left this lovely note on the door. This is, they were going to be in the neighborhood, that they were going to be doing some work. If we felt like that, that their workmen were disruptive in any way, that we should, there was a contact information for the person that we should contact with a phone number and an email address. And I felt like this is such a great letter, right? I kept it because I felt like, well, if they disturb me, I'm going to call them. but this is also good marketing for them, right? Because now I kept it. HOA payment fees. Most of us are not really paying these things via check anymore, but so I would put them in my monthly because it's really not useful. This is a rebate request. So whenever you fill those things out, they, once they sent you the money or the card for whatever, you can throw that away. Letters from your HOA just telling you that, they're having an annual meeting or a monthly meeting, or they're asking for you to nominate people, or the budget. I mean, nobody really looks at their HOA budget, so you can throw that away. I took my car to be serviced and they gave me a loaner and I had to sign paperwork for it. Once I returned the car, the paperwork expired. So that was completely useless. What is this? Car registration, tax payments, more insurance information. This is, probably going through some of this beforehand, like minor purchase. So I recommend that people keep all of their major purchases separate, and major purchase to me may be different to you. So, like a couch would be a major purchase for me. So I would put that with my house stuff, where if I bought like some votive holders, which is what this receipt is for, that would be a minor purchase. I would put it in my monthly, and then at some point I just, in the next year, I'd probably get rid of that. Hotel receipts, more mail orders, trips that you have taken, receipts for that, reservations, concert receipts, work orders. So this seems to be like a really big category for people. If you have some service done at your house, there is a difference between maintenance, which is what you do, like if you have your HVAC service, or if the plumbing guy comes for like to fix a little leak, or if you're just doing like minor landscaping or getting your grass cut. Those to me are like minor work that you do. That's maintenance. You can have an argument that could be a tax write-off to you, and I will leave that completely up to you. But for the majority of people, that is just a maintenance that has no long-term value. I would put that in your monthly. But major contracts, things like if you have an HVAC contract and you're getting your HVAC serviced a couple of times a year, that would probably be something that I would put more like permanently with your house. But this is, the system was just acting up, and he just came and looked at it. So that to me, and it was like $50 in payment. So that's not something I would keep long-term. Prescription paperwork. So when you go to the pharmacy, they give you all sorts of paper that comes with it. Unless you are, even if you are in a drug trial nowadays, you have to probably sign a lot of paperwork. This is that if you died, you're not going to sue them. So there's no way around that. But if you're taking prescription drugs, there's all kinds of warnings that come with it. I normally don't really read any of that. So I just put that in my monthly to be thrown away. So this is lots of, weird mail orders, not weird, like things that people ordered, different kinds. Anything that's a mail order that is a small ticket, right? Just think of it. It's not like a major purchase. It's a small ticket, and whatever a small ticket is to you, that would probably go in there. I went to the Minute Clinic and they just gave me a 12-page printout of my meeting with them. Don't really need any of that. Speeding tickets would probably be something I would put it in there, unless you get a lot of them, and then you should probably go to driving school so you can get some of the points taken from your license. So that may be something that you need to keep with your personal files if you're a repeat offender. MetLife just recently changed their name to Bright House Financial, so they sent everybody a letter. So I don't know why it was kept, but put that in there in the monthly. pet sitting notices. So when the pet sitter comes over, she leaves you a love letter. What do you do with that? So I just throw it in my monthly. I had an HOA violation because one of my shutters were falling down. I got it fixed. Now I'm done with it. Jury duty stubs. So when you go to jury duty, they give you $30 for the day. That's that. Concert tickets, plane tickets for trips taken, car rentals, hotels. So you kind of get the picture, right? None of this stuff next year, if I looked back at it, would I be missing it and saying like, oh man, I really wish I had that thing. Like all of this is completely useless paperwork that would be sitting on my desk, randomly wasting space that I don't need. So that goes into my monthly file. So let's see, question. My oh, thank you. I did treat myself to manicures. Remember last week how I said that? It's just feeling really good about that. I'm very excited. Thank you so much for pointing that out. It's hard work to get a manicure. So no other questions besides my manicure. So that's cool. So I'm going back to my presentation over here. Doing it wrong, man. If I had $1 for every time I did this. Okay, let's try this again. All right, we're winding down. Don't worry, we're almost there. So, okay, so I believe people keep too much paperwork they don't need. Do you get it, right? After seeing all of the pieces of paper I just told you about, those are all of the things that are like lingering around. So monthly, get rid of it. That was the story of the client I said that had moved those boxes of paper and he didn't need it. The temporary, your filing system. I said 2 parts, but I lied. I have changed this since I created this presentation. I think it's more like a 5-parter. Remember, it's your monthly, it's your taxes, then it's your home and your car, which is more like the stuff you own. And then there's like the people that live in your home, and then there's like the financial part of it a little bit. So that's a 5-part series. We just talked about your temporary. I gave you, I think there's 21 items listed on the record retention guideline. We did talk a lot more than 21 items, but they were a lot of repeats of the same kind of idea. These are just, when you see it, it's just not long-term. So not to beat the dead horse, but it's 12 hanging files, 12 tabs from January through December. I'm going to highly recommend to start off with a full drawer as you're sorting through your paperwork and as you're like establishing what you need to keep, what you don't need to keep. I have worked with somebody, she's like, I don't like reading these things. I just throw it in the bin. I just throw it in the file as is. And if, that gives me anxiety not reading it, but it works for her. She knows exactly what's happening over there. If you feel like that would work for you too, no judgment from me, right? At least it's where it needs to be. However, I would highly recommend reading it first. That's just, that literally gives me anxiety right there. So that's what it looks like, staggered, super easy to read. Don't get fancy. Like if you decide you don't like the green, that you want to have, like blue or gray or red or green, whatever it is, just try to keep it simple there. This will literally be 80% of the paperwork that you get. That's going to go in here. I believe about 15% of the rest of the paperwork is like more permanent, and about 5% of it will go with your taxes. What did I say? Your home, your car, your people. Oh, I forgot your pets. Your people and your pets probably go together for me. As you start going through your permanent filing system, which we're going to talk about more in our next class, I want you to like start exercising your commingling, right? Because it's like the temporary filing system is like a big shock for people. Like every time I say to people, like, we're going to put everything together into the same folder. They literally freak out. Like, very rarely people don't freak out. They're like, why? What do you mean? I'm not going to have a Verizon file anymore. And then I always say, well, why do you need a Verizon file? And they're like, I don't know. I just need one. And like, no, you don't, right? So as you like start exercising this commingling thing that we're going to be doing, it will ease you into the rest of the process as we really commingle more and more. But it will help you with like thinking broad categories, adding multiple pieces of paper to the same file. It will just simplify. It will just become a way of life for you. So that's that. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is a little bit about the IRS. And then we're going to wrap up. I'm going to check on my agenda before I start that. Okie dokie. Cover that, and that, and the IRS. Okay. I didn't do that. Oh, I did do that right. Yay, I did it right last time. Okay, so your IRS filing system will look something like this. Oh, now that I did it right, I want to not share my screen. Here we go. So your IRS filing system is like, you know, taxes 2017, taxes 2016, and you can put the number first or the number after, whatever makes you happy. I'm pretty flex. Just be consistent. So every single year, so there are 7 years over here. So as you're going around, you know, accumulating stuff and looking through your piles, all of your taxes should go together. So one thing I recommend people, I'm putting this down. I get it individually. So one thing I recommend people put with their taxes is their bank statements and their 401k statements. And the reason why I recommend that is that if you get audited by the IRS, they're going to want to see all of your money in, money out, right? And they will likely ask for your bank statements, but they also may ask for other things. So you already have it, it's lingering around your office, you might as well just organize it and keep it. That stuff is really expensive to request. We now do live in age of technology where you can probably go and download all of it and then print it. But it's such a process, you already have it. I would recommend that just stick it with your yearly files. And then, you know, in 7 years, you can just purge it all together and then you're good to go. So, you know, the IRS, going back to my screen sharing, the IRS is pretty systemized on what they request us to keep, and every piece of paper that we receive that is, you know, it says so right there, it's for your taxes, it's labeled that way. So there is not a whole lot of variation on that. You know, the more complicated your life is, the more paperwork you're going to have, the more simplified your financial is, the less paperwork you're going to have, and the simpler your filing is going to be. So I do like to disclaim that I am not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just an organizer, and that over the years, you know, I have devised this filing system to the best of my ability, to what I've seen in my clients, but there's a lot of unknowns about your personal plan and what you have and what you need. So if you don't feel comfortable with anything I'm saying to you, I highly recommend you consult with your lawyer and your accountant and make sure that we're all on the same page and that you're feeling comfortable about the decisions you're making about your paperwork, just because I don't want you to recklessly dispose of things because I said so when when your situation may be different. So if you live in the US, we are required to file our taxes on April 15th. Some people abide by that. I have hardly ever meet people anymore that file their taxes on the 15th. It seems like everybody filed their taxes on October 15th, which is the last deadline to file our taxes. So that may be useful to know. You should, the amount of time you should keep your taxes depends on who you are, how complicated your taxes are, how much you know, if you have a business, if you don't have a business. So I normally recommend 7 years because I feel like it covers a lot of the spectrum of the tax code and a lot of different suggestions that, you know, tax accountants will suggest. So I feel like it's one simple way to just get that done and not have to like be into the nuances of what, when, and how long do I need to keep it. So 7 years to me covers a lot. Hardly do I ever work with people that they will have more than a couple of drawers worth of, you know, or a couple of bins worth of tax paperwork. So it never seems to be a ton of paper once you organize it. So I'm hoping that it's the same with you. You know, if you're taking medical expenses right off, you probably want to keep those receipts. You know, whatever else you're using that that you're taking a tax deduction, and that needs to be included in your tax with your tax records. You want to keep anything that substantiates an income or a tax deduction. So if you get, you know, if you get audited, you have to be able to prove that. There's a lot of conversation about like being able to keep records online or, you know, digital files, and that's totally cool. But as far as I know, if you get audited, you will have to print all of this stuff. I haven't been through an audit with a client in a while. It's probably been about 3 years since I did one. And they made us basically, they gave us a long list of things they wanted, and they made us print everything. And we had to print in duplicates. Like my client had to go with her one bin and her one binder, and then we had to provide the IRS with a duplicate of their own stuff that they, you know, that they received and kept. So all of the things that we had to give them had to be printed, organized, and given it to them. So if you look at the tax code, which it can be very complicated. So some of the things, and I'm not even going to go through this, but some of the things say, you know, if this and this situation applies to you, you have to keep it for 3 years. If you have this or that situation applies, and you have to keep it for that year. And so that's why I'm saying the 7 year covers a lot of the nuances of what the tax record is, and it just makes your life simple. And there's one thing to remember, and you know, we all know that I like simplified, so 7 years just seems like a good thing. One question people ask me a lot has to do with homes and selling of homes. I believe that you should keep all of the paperwork that belongs to the current home that you own. And if you have refinanced, I mean, there's definitely some streamlining you can do that. I normally recommend people, I normally recommend people to get a separate bin depending on how long they have lived in a home. And it's like all of the real estate paperwork, or like the purchasing, the refinancing, you know, the home inspections, the appraisals, there's a lot of paper that goes with it. When I moved into this home, the person that owned this house was very organized, and she came to closing with this beautiful box. And it had all of the pieces of paper that she had ever done, anything that was outside of maintenance, right? It's outside of like having the plumber come over and fix the leaky sink. She had every piece of paper that was ever moved in and out of this house. So I have continued her legacy, and I have added on to this beautiful box. And then one day when I have to move, everything that I'm probably going to need to purge a little bit, because some of the things, like I recently had to replace my HVAC. So the original HVAC paperwork is no longer valid, right? So there's a little updating, but everything that belongs to this house pretty much is in that bin. And then you can, you know, you can get rid of stuff. So the majority of people that own houses, that stuff doesn't need to be easily accessible, because you never look at it. It's just, you know, it's just, if you move, then you give it away. And if you don't, it's just there for, you know, for the sake of being there. So it doesn't need to go into your filing system. It can go somewhere else. So that's basically what this is talking about. So there's my, there's my summary. Keep everything for 7 years. And that's that. Okay, so we covered a lot of stuff today. And And I think that's just basically to recap, the majority of the time we spent today, we talked about creating a monthly filing system and then starting to sort our paperwork. So I'm going to recommend that that you start doing some of that, right? Because I think what happens is as you start touching your paperwork, there's going to be a lot of questions. So remember, next week we don't have a class. We're gonna skip a week, so it'll give you some time to work through what you have learned, to start sorting through your paperwork, create a temporary filing system so you can start putting some of that stuff away. Establish how long you want to keep paperwork for, right? Do you want to keep it? Is 1 year good enough for you? I'm hoping the answer is yes. And then start filing your way. So I don't see any questions. I know we talked a lot. We covered a lot of stuff. Lots of awesome things happening to your paperwork, I hope. I am always grateful for the time I spent. Thanks, Nicole, for hanging out the whole time. You're a rock star. If I could magically wave a wand, I would get all your paperwork organized. But anyway, I appreciate all of the questions. I appreciate all of the feedback. So if you have any questions in between, let me know. I think I've covered all I wanted to cover today. So remember, no class next week. So I will see you in 2 weeks when we're gonna talk some more about we're gonna recap on your temporary filing system. I'm gonna answer questions. I'm gonna let you see my permanent filing system and what that looks like. And that it will make complete sense when you look at that, because you took away all of the taxable and you took away all of the monthly, don't have any long-term value for you. And then what's left is a lot of your permanent files. So have an awesome couple of weeks, and I will see you soon. Thank you. Bye.